What's up, everyone? This is the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 3 of my essay and talk about all of the characters in Fire Emblem that are either confirmed autistic or autistic coded. Considering this is part 3, parts 1 and 2 are up now, so if you want to watch those first, I suggest you watch both of them before coming back and watching part 3, because we got a lot more to go over. And with that, without further ado, let's get back into it. Alright. If you remember from my previous video from part 2, I mentioned about Ophelia and how she's basically considered autistic, as well as basically being a mention of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope, which is a trope that has been said to be used to describe autistic women that have been seen as demeaning or infantilizing. Which doesn't say that much, but Ophelia also does have other autistic tropes outside that. Traits outside that aren't contended with the entire trope. That being said, you may remember I mentioned that there might be a chance that she may have gotten it from her father. Well, in all fairness, that's where we're starting at. And for once, we're away from the mages, as Owain, for those fans of Fire Emblem Awakening, is basically a mermaiden, as well as a fan-favorite character from Awakening. Although I don't like what Fates did to the poor guy. Oh boy. Anyway, all that aside, that being said, considering how Owain is Lissa's son, he basically came back from the future to more or less help out. Especially after Lissa and whoever his father ended up perishing in the attack caused by Grima. And as such, more often than not, the guy's more or less your standard Cunibio. I mean, for those who have played Fire Emblem Awakening and have recruited Owain, take a look at his thing. Yeah, he has the standard Cunibio pose, which is kind of awesome. That being said, ironically, when he comes back to the past, one thing is simple. He's looking for the legendary sword Mistletoe. As in, the sword Mistletoe from the Yggdrasil titles, or from Genealogy of the Holy War, and the legendary sword of Ares himself. Oh boy, I think we all know where this is going. Yeah, he largely spends time doing so, to the point that he's more or less consumed with it. And yeah, considering how he's more or less obsessed with weapons, yeah, I guess one could have said, specifically with the legendary sword Mistletoe, yeah, one could consider that his special interest. Even though he ends up getting another generic sword called Mistletoe. Yeah. However, that being said, his entire... a lot of his supports are basically just his usual thing. Him just being his usual hammy self. And it proves that he's more or less obsessed with becoming a hero. Again, special interest. To the point that growing up, when he was a kid, he used to play heroes with he used to play the Justice Cabal with Cynthia. And honestly, basically considering and keep in mind, I was considering Cynthia for the autistic for an autistic character. No, we don't really see much of that, except for the fact that she's a little bit clumsy, but then again, she may have gotten that from Sumiya. But in all fairness, yeah, it really does say a lot. And to the point that he's more or less able to imagine a story involving his heroic title. And that's not the only one. As we see in the support with Noir, he more or less is willing. He's more or less willing to basically just, well, be obsessive over other things, like when, like he more or less is like Ophelia obsesses over the tea Dwyer made. More often than not, Owain is willing to be obsessive over a cake that Noir made just because it's so dang good. And yeah, really does say a lot. That being said, there are a lot of other supports that show this, and naturally, sometimes when it comes down to the those on the autistic spectrum, when it comes to those we're really kind of excited about, yeah, it's kind of obvious that there are people that will always knock it down. And surprisingly, we get that with his supports with Inigo and Severa, who are naturally his friends. But of course, well, Inigo's is just some good-natured ribbing between the two of them, and he's willing to get annoyed with him. Severa just flat out tells him he's a straight-up weirdo for acting that way. To the point that in the A support, he's more or less depressed over that fact, where he basically believes he really is a weirdo, and only for Severa to just say, okay, maybe I was wrong, maybe you're not a weirdo. And yeah, it kind of makes weird sense. However, there's also one more thing, and it comes from Fire Emblem Fates, specifically with him as Odin. And yes, it's a support with Orochi, as basically, more or less, Orochi mentions that she senses some issues with his magic, that is to the point that it feels gunked up. And, well, he understands it to a point. So he basically asks her if there's any way for him to, well, unplunge his mojo so his magic can flow freely, and so his dark magic can flow freely. And Orochi basically tells him there is, and she says, here, take this list and get me the ingredients. And he basically just goes off to collect the ingredients for her spell, which, as it turns out, Orochi was just yanking his chain and just had him just go do her shopping. That is devious. Granted, she does essentially come clean, but honestly, when it comes down to it, this is unfortunately something that many people on the spectrum will go through, as there are some bad actors that are willing to take advantage of people on the spectrum, just no matter what. And many people would think that they're just doing that just to be friendly, only to get taken advantage of, or what have you. Because there's a point where most of us don't know much about friendship or relation, or having a healthy friendship or a healthy relationship, that will think any sort of positive interaction with a person is something that can more often end up in a very bad situation. and with the person that many people think are their friend or think love them, end up taking them for a ride or taking them for anything they got. And yeah, it's a sad situation, a sad state of the world today, but it happens. Speaking of swordsmen that honestly prove to be autistic, is Felix from Fire Emblem Three Houses. At first glance, simple one thing comes to mind. He's blunt. Yeah, he is blunt as all heck. And in all fairness, this is something with most people on the autistic spectrum. We can be blunt. In fact, more often than not, we will tell the truth, no matter if it hurts or not. I mean, heck. I basically have told a few lies here and there, but more often than not, I pride myself in telling the truth, no matter what happens. And honestly, that one's true. As Felix basically is more or less willing to speak his mind and just tell someone straight out what he thinks of them. And honestly, there are a lot of supports with this. But keeping him as basically, he more or less shows just what he feels about not only chivalry, but for those who have played through Three Houses and seen the support with Ingrid, yeah, more often than not, Ingrid basically comes to try and get him to go to class or the war council, only for him to refuse. And as it turns out, he was at the previous class or war council, and they were talking about the strategy, and he just ended up rambling some stuff where he believed some wild tactic before essentially leaving. And while he did so, yeah, after he left, they basically went along, they basically decided to talk about his entire strategy that he had just spouted off. And honestly, it's one of the best things I've ever seen. And honestly, when it comes down to it, there's just a lot of supports in this one that I don't think I can cover them all. From honestly his and Ash's support on just how about chivalry and knights, all due to a book. Of course, with Ash just not letting his harsh words just affect him that much because he's such a good boy. To Felix coming across Annette singing and actually liking her singing, with her just thinking that he's just there to mock her. Again, watch Felix and Annette supports, you will laugh. But there are two supports that honestly prove some more autistic traits. Specifically, Felix's supports with Bernadetta, as in the C support, he tries to return her satchel, and Bernadette is so scared that she thinks he's there to kill her, and he just basically thinks someone's trying to kill him and draws his sword, only for Bernadette to freak out and disarm him before running off. And he's so impressed that he tries to learn the same tactic that she used. I mean, that's so crazy, but it's awesome. And his support with Mercedes in Fire Emblem Three Hopes. Felix finds a cat, and he brings it to Mercedes to get her help in taking care of it. It proves that he has a soft spot for cats. What other autistic person doesn't? This will be continued in part 4. See you then.